Welcome back to the course, Protecting Legal Rights of Artists and Designers. I am Jonathan Politi, and we are working our way through materials covering the legal system and dispute resolution. And in this segment, we will be covering jurisdiction. It's the authority of courts to handle cases. In the last segment, we started on some of what jurisdiction is, the power of courts to handle and settle disputes. But as I alluded to in the last video, courts just can't take on any case. Courts are organized in the state and federal systems, and they are places that are properly designated to go to when trying to resolve a dispute. Think of jurisdiction as a way of qualifying a court. It empowers courts to hear cases, and it also limits courts. It sets the boundaries. It also sets expectations. Geography, subject matter jurisdiction, federal or state jurisdiction, and original or appellate jurisdiction. These are categories of jurisdiction that help qualify and organize courts. Parties use these criteria to answer the question, am I in the right place? Courts just can't take any case, and you can't just go to any court to resolve a dispute. But there are some options, and you do have some choices of venues depending on what the case is about and who is involved. The first of these categories for jurisdiction that we will look at is geography, the connection to the location where the court is located. And rather than just tell you, here's a visual. Connection to the court, such as a state court. Here's Ohio as an example. Geography is how the parties, the stakeholders in a lawsuit, are physically connected to the court. Maybe it's the place where the parties live, or where the headquarters for a business is located. That's known as domicile, and it gives the court what is known as personal jurisdiction over the parties to a case. Maybe it's where the personal property or real property, the real estate, is located. That gives the court what is known as in rem jurisdiction over the property to a case. Or maybe it's where the events took place, like a car accident or a business transaction. All of these create a connection to the court to give it authority to hear a case. But it's possible to have multiple state courts that can qualify to hear a case. Multiple states that can be chosen at the same time. Multiple jurisdictions that might be possible as options to file a lawsuit. If the parties are from multiple states, or if a business is located in multiple locations, multiple forums are where a case can be heard. Now, that doesn't mean that multiple lawsuits can be filed at the same time with the same parties for the same events in different courts. You have to choose a forum. Choose a court in that jurisdiction, that geographic jurisdiction, with connection to the parties. That's for convenience, cost, and common sense for everyone involved. The parties, the court, the attorneys, the witnesses, and the other evidence are part of the idea with this type of jurisdiction. The same idea of geography works with the federal court system. Federal courts are organized into geographic collections called circuits, and within the circuits are districts for the trial courts. As an example, Ohio has 2 federal court districts, northern and southern, where federal court cases can be heard, connected to the parties based on geography. Here, the parties could file a lawsuit in the Northern District of Ohio based on personal jurisdiction, jurisdiction over the property, or where the events took place. And if there's a connection to Kansas, they could file in the Kansas District Court. They only have 1 district because of population. Or, if there's a connection to South Dakota, they could file in the South Dakota District Court. They only have 1 district court because of the population. Contrast that with Indiana and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has 3 district courts, Western, Middle, and Eastern, to break up the state because of their population. There are more people, so it makes sense. And again, it's a physical connection to the court. So, personal jurisdiction exists when a defendant is domiciled within the court's territorial boundaries, state court or federal court, So that is living in or having a business located within the court's geographical territory, or where the actions or events took place. Property. In rem jurisdiction over the property exists when the property that is the subject of a lawsuit is located within the court's geographical territory. That can be real estate, or known as real property. That's the land or buildings or other fixtures that are connected to the land. Or it can be personal property, things that aren't connected to the land and can be moved around, such as motor vehicles, inventory, equipment, or other physical items that can be located within the territorial boundaries. There is a connection to the location. All right, let's talk about subject matter jurisdiction again. Subject matter jurisdiction limits the court to the types or topics of law that a court is able to review. Subject matter jurisdiction can be divided into general and limited jurisdiction. Remember that there are specialty courts as well as courts of general jurisdiction. There are certain areas of law where it's beneficial to have courts specifically focused on particular types of cases. So, just as the geography, the personal and property connection gives authority to a court to hear cases, subject matter, the areas of law that courts are empowered to hear, provides courts with the authority to review cases. We've looked at this before, both in state and federal courts. Specialty courts, such as bankruptcy, tax, juvenile, and domestic relations. Some courts are specifically authorized to deal with matters that are covered by specific areas of law. When a party files a case, it should be in a court that has power to deal in that area of law. That takes us to the next type of jurisdiction, federal or state jurisdiction. What laws apply, federal or state? Are the parties from different states and the amount of controversy high enough that it can be in federal court? Most cases wind up in state courts. That being said, federal courts have the power to hear cases when it involves a federal question. It's based on a federal law, like a federal statute, the U.S. Constitution, a federal regulation, or a treaty. Or, in cases of diversity jurisdiction, parties from different states in a lawsuit that is over $75,000 in value. That's diversity jurisdiction. We'll cover that in a moment. So, this flowchart helps in showing how to decide. If it involves a state law, then the state court system. If the law in question is a federal law, then it will be filed in the federal court system. Pretty straightforward. But it's possible to get a case involving a state law into a federal court, even if there's no federal law involved. It's called diversity jurisdiction. When the parties are from different states and the amount involved is over $75,000, then the case can be heard in federal court. It's to help prevent home court advantage. And the federal court has the power to decide state law because of diversity jurisdiction. But what if there's both state and federal laws involved? There's this rule for concurrent jurisdiction when there are issues involving both state and federal laws. Both courts would have the authority to hear the case and decide on the laws as long as there isn't a matter that belongs in a specialty court, one of those courts of limited jurisdiction. Here are the images showing state and federal structure. Depending on which laws are being enforced, federal or state law, or both in some cases, the party bringing the lawsuit, also known as the plaintiff, may have the option to choose amongst multiple jurisdictions. But you have to choose one. Okay, that moves us from federal or state jurisdiction to original versus appellate jurisdiction, trial or appeal, which is a matter of timing and process. We've already covered this, believe it or not. Original jurisdiction is the entry level. It's the authority of a court to hear a case for the very first time. It's the trial court, where storytelling is done. And presentation of a case and evidence to provide proof and credibility. And appellate jurisdiction is the ability of a court to review a lower court's decisions. Here are the visuals that we looked at previously for both state and federal courts. Remember, trial courts have original jurisdiction and appeals courts have appellate jurisdiction. All right. 2 more slides to wrap up the topic of jurisdiction. Concurrent jurisdiction. Concurrent jurisdiction is when authority exists with both state and federal courts to hear a case, when there are both federal and state laws involved, or there is diversity jurisdiction. And exclusive jurisdiction. Exclusive jurisdiction is when there is a type of law that belongs in a specialty court in the federal or state courts. Those courts have the power to exclude other courts from deciding the matters involved because of specialization. And the last issue is the internet, where there may not be a physical location for a court to have a physical connection. Courts have developed a standard to show connection to a particular court in order to grant jurisdiction. And to our last slide, this has the layout of federal and state courts next to one another. Courts of original jurisdiction at the state level, and at the federal level. These are the trial courts. And appellate courts, both at the state and at the federal court systems, with the Supreme Court being the highest court in the entire system. In red are the trial courts, which is where storytelling is done. And then in orange is the appellate courts, and that's where cases are reviewed. When you're filing a case, the important thing to remember with jurisdiction is choose one. Alright, so this may all seem a bit much and a little confusing. You're probably saying to yourselves, why do I need to know all this? Because I am Chicken Little, and the sky is going to fall. More than likely, in today's litigious society, you're going to sue or be sued at some point. It's good to have an understanding of what will happen and how it works. These visuals should help get some clarity and some understanding with the process. Speaking of which, that's a good lead in to our next segment, the court process. That will be our next video.